Daeho stood in the center of the massive chamber, feeling smaller than he had ever felt in his life. The walls around him curved upward into darkness, and the floor beneath his feet was made of something that looked like black glass. Above him, arranged in a circle, sat the members of the Crythian War Council. They were huge creatures, each one at least 3 meters tall, with scales that gleamed like metal under the strange purple lights. He had come here to save his people. He had come here to beg for peace. Honorable members of the council, Daeho began, his voice steady despite the fear in his chest. Humanity asks only for the chance to exist in peace. We have done nothing to threaten your empire. We simply wish to live on our world and raise our children in safety. One of the Crythians laughed. It was a deep rumbling sound that made Daeho's bones vibrate. Supreme Commander Valtris leaned forward, his massive head tilting to one side as he examined the human ambassador like a scientist might examine an insect. Peace? Valtris said, his voice like grinding stones. You speak of peace, little creature, but you do not understand your position. Your world sits on resources we require. Your species occupies space we need. You are in our way. Daeho felt his heart sink, but he pressed on. Behind him, a holographic image of Earth appeared, showing the blue and green planet spinning slowly. Cities dotted the surface, connected by lights that showed where millions of humans lived and worked and loved. We can share, Daeho said. We can trade. Humanity has much to offer. Our scientists, our artists, your scientists? Another council member interrupted, her voice dripping with contempt. We have been traveling the stars for 12,000 years while your ancestors were still learning to make fire. What could you possibly offer us? Daeho clenched his fists at his sides. He had expected this. The Crythians saw themselves as the masters of the galaxy, and everyone else as lesser beings. But he had to try. For Earth, for his wife and daughter waiting at home, for the 6 billion souls who depended on him to find a way out of this nightmare. Please, he said quietly, we are not asking for much. Just let us live. Valtris stood up, his full height making Daeho feel like a child. The Supreme Commander walked down from his seat, his clawed feet clicking on the glass floor. He stopped just in front of Daeho, looking down at him with eyes that held no warmth, no compassion, nothing but cold calculation. Here are our terms, Valtris said. Humanity will surrender completely. You will give us access to all your technology. You will dismantle your military. 90% of your population will become workers for the Empire. The remaining 10% will be allowed to continue existing under our supervision. You have 72 hours to accept these terms. Daeho felt the blood drain from his face. That's not peace. That's slavery. That is survival, Valtris corrected. The alternative is extinction. Choose wisely, human. The council chamber fell silent. Daeho knew what his answer had to be. He knew what the people of Earth would say, but he also knew what it would mean. I will deliver your message, Daeho said, his voice barely above a whisper. But I already know what my people will say. Humanity will never surrender. We will never kneel. Valtris smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. Then humanity will burn. The transmission ended and Daeho found himself back on his small diplomatic ship, alone in the darkness of space. He sat in the pilot's seat for a long time, staring at the blue dot in the distance that was Earth. Then he sent the message home. On Earth, in the United Terran Assembly Building, President Ji-Yeon stood before the gathered representatives of every nation. The room was silent as she finished reading the Crythian ultimatum. No one spoke for a long moment. Then one representative stood up. I vote no. We will not surrender, another stood. No surrender. Within minutes, every single representative was standing. 200 voices spoke as one. No surrender. Ji-Yeon felt tears in her eyes, but she nodded. She had known this would be the answer. Humanity had fought too hard, come too far to simply give up now. Even if it meant death, they would face it with their heads held high. Admiral Minho received the orders within the hour. Begin evacuation protocols. Get as many people off Earth as possible. Save who they could. He stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking at the small defense fleet that Earth had managed to build. 20 cruisers, 40 destroyers, 100 small fighters, against the might of an empire that had conquered half the galaxy. It was not enough. It would never be enough, but they would fight anyway. Start loading the civilian ships, Minho ordered. Priority to children and scientists. We need to preserve knowledge, preserve hope. If Earth falls, humanity must continue somewhere else. His officers moved quickly, coordinating with the evacuation centers on the planet below. Thousands of ships began lifting off, heading for orbit where the larger colony vessels waited. Each ship carried hundreds or thousands of people, all of them looking back at their home with tears streaming down their faces. They were saying goodbye to Earth. The Krithian Armada arrived early. They did not give humanity the full 72 hours. Perhaps they knew what the answer would be. Perhaps they simply did not care. They came out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the solar system, and the sensors lit up with so many contacts that the defense computers could barely count them all. 1,000 warships, each one bigger than anything humanity had ever built. Admiral Minho stood on his bridge and felt his heart turn to ice. Half the evacuation ships were still in orbit, still loading people. They would never escape in time. All ships, he said into the communication system. Defend the evacuation fleet. Buy them as much time as you can. For Earth. For humanity. The small human fleet moved forward to meet the Krithian Armada. It was like watching children with sticks trying to fight a forest fire. The Krithian ships opened fire at extreme range, their weapons tearing through human shields like they were made of paper. The first human cruiser exploded in a ball of fire, then another, then 3 more. Minho's flagship shuddered as enemy fire hit the hull. Alarms blared. People screamed. But the crew held their positions, firing back, trying desperately to slow the enemy advance. It was not enough. The Krithian fleet pushed through the human defense line like it was not even there. They reached the orbit of Earth and began their bombardment. The evacuation ships scattered, some escaping into faster-than-light travel, others exploding as enemy fire found them. On Earth, people looked up and saw fire falling from the sky. The Krithian bombardment weapons hit the surface with the force of small nuclear explosions. Seoul vanished in an instant, replaced by a crater of molten glass. New York followed. Then Mumbai, Lagos, Tokyo, London, Beijing. Every major city on Earth was targeted. 6 billion people died in 6 hours. President Jian was in the Capitol building when the fire came. She held her aide's hand and thought about her children, already on one of the evacuation ships, already safe. At least they would live. At least humanity would continue. The building vaporized and Jian with it. Admiral Minho watched from space as his homeworld burned. His ship was dying around him, life support failing, hull breached in a dozen places. But he kept his eyes on Earth, watching the blue and green planet turn brown and black and red. "Remember this," he said to his surviving crew. "Remember what they did. If any of us survive, we remember, and one day we will make them pay." His ship exploded 30 seconds later. The Krithian fleet finished their work and left. They did not stay to occupy Earth. There was nothing left to occupy. The planet was dead, its atmosphere poisoned, its surface scorched. They filed their report and moved on to their next conquest. They believed the human problem was solved. They were wrong. Captain Hyejin stood on the bridge of the colony ship Eternal Vigil, watching the recorded transmission from Earth for the 100th time. The screen showed the planet burning, showed the cities turning to ash, showed the moment when all communication stopped. She had watched it so many times that she could see every detail with her eyes closed. The way the fires spread, the way the clouds turned black. The silence that came after the screaming stopped she would never forget. Around her the other survivors gathered. There were 3 billion humans left, scattered across hundreds of colony ships that had escaped. They were spread across deep space, hiding in the darkness between stars, afraid that the Krithians would come to finish what they started. "What do we do now?" someone asked. Hyejin turned off the recording and looked at her crew. They were frightened. They were grieving. They had lost everything, but they were alive, and that meant something. "We survive," she said simply. "We hide, we grow stronger, and we never ever forget what they did to us." The colony ships scattered. They went to systems so remote that no one had ever mapped them. They built their homes inside asteroids and on frozen moons where no one would think to look. They kept complete communication silence, sending no signals that could be traced. To the galaxy, humanity simply vanished. The Krithian Empire continued its expansion. They conquered 17 more species over the next century. They enslaved populations and stripped worlds of resources. They believed they were unstoppable, and why would they not? They had been the dominant force in the galaxy for 12,000 years. They did not think about the humans anymore. They were just another extinct species, another problem solved. But in the darkness, humanity was changing. Commander Youngsu stood in the massive underground facility on a moon that had no name. Around him stretched kilometers of construction bays, where the first of the new warships was taking shape. It was huge, far bigger than anything humanity had built before, and it was designed for one purpose only: war. "Are you sure this will work?" asked one of the engineers. Youngsu nodded. "The Krithians are powerful, but they are slow. They have not had to innovate in centuries because no one has challenged them. We will advance faster than they can imagine." He walked through the facility, examining the work being done. Every surviving human scientist had been put to work on weapons research. They did not build homes or create art or write music. They built weapons. Nothing else mattered. Dr. Yunji led the physics team that was working on the quantum fold drive. The theory was simple, even if the execution was not. Instead of traveling through normal space at faster than light speeds, their ships would compress spacetime around them and fold from one point to another almost instantly. "If we can make this work," Yunji explained to the military commanders, "we can appear anywhere in the galaxy without warning. We can bypass their defenses completely." "How long until it is ready?" asked Admiral Somin, who had taken over military command after Admiral Minho's death. 5 years for the first prototype. Maybe 10 for full fleet implementation. "Make it 3, Somin said. "We do not have time to waste." Yunji did not argue. None of them did. They all understood the urgency. Every day they waited was another day the Krithians lived free and unpunished. The years passed. 10 years, 20, 50, 100. Human colonies grew larger but remained hidden. Children were born who had never seen Earth except in recordings. They grew up watching the footage of their homeworld burning. They grew up with stories of the Krithians and what they had done. They grew up knowing that one day humanity would return, and they would bring vengeance with them. The shipyards expanded. The first Retribution-class dreadnought rolled out of construction after 80 years of work. It was 3 kilometers long, armed with weapons that could tear through the hull of a Krithian battleship like it was made of cloth. The test firing of its main cannon destroyed an entire asteroid field. They built more, hundreds of them. The resources of 100 hidden colonies went into the fleet. People lived in poverty so that the ships could be built. They worked in dangerous conditions. They sacrificed everything, because Earth demanded justice. Admiral Somin stood in front of the growing fleet 200 years after Earth's fall. She was old now, kept alive by medical technology that humanity had developed in their years of hiding. Behind her floated nearly 1,000 warships, each one a masterpiece of destructive engineering. "Is it enough?" asked Captain Bora, one of her top commanders. Somin shook her head. "We need more. We need to be absolutely certain. The Krithians are still powerful. If we attack before we are ready, we will fail and humanity will truly go extinct." So they kept building. They kept training. They developed tactics that no one in the galaxy had ever seen before. Humanity had always been innovative, always been clever. Now they focused all of that creativity on one goal: killing Krithians. They practiced coordination between ships, using the quantum fold drives to appear and disappear in battle. They developed new weapons based on exotic physics that the Krithians had never explored. They created ship armor that could withstand incredible punishment, and they developed the Starbreaker engineer Juon, presented the weapon to the military command 300 years after Earth burned. The room fell silent as he explained what it did. "It destabilizes the fusion reaction at the core of a star," he said quietly. "Once activated, the star will go supernova within hours. Everything in the system dies." "Everything?" someone asked. "Everything," Juon confirmed. "Every planet. Every ship. Every living thing." The room stayed silent for a long time. Finally, Admiral Somin spoke. "Can it be stopped once activated?" "No. Once the process begins, it cannot be reversed." "How many can we build?" Juon hesitated. "This weapon, it will kill billions, maybe trillions." "Are we sure? How many can we build?" Somin repeated, her voice cold. 10 with current resources. "Build 20, Somin ordered. "They burned Earth, they killed 6 billion of us. They will learn what it means to face a species with nothing left to lose." Not everyone agreed. There were arguments in the colonies. Some humans believed that genocide was wrong no matter what had been done to them, that if they killed all the Krithians they would become the monsters, but they were a minority. Most humans remembered Earth. Most humans had lost someone they loved. And most humans wanted revenge more than they wanted to remain innocent. The final fleet assembled 3 centuries after Earth's destruction, 2,800 warships, each crewed by people who had trained their entire lives for this moment. The largest armada humanity had ever created, and every single ship was designed to kill. Admiral Minho's daughter, also named Minho after her father, stood on the bridge of the flagship Vengeance. She was young, only 50 years old, but she had been trained since birth for this role. Her father had died defending Earth. His last words had been recorded. "Remember this. Make them pay." She intended to honor his memory. "All ships report ready," said the communications officer. Minho looked around at her bridge crew. They were focused, determined, and absolutely cold. There was no excitement here, no joy. This was not a glorious adventure. This was extermination. "Send the message," Minho ordered. The transmission went out on every frequency across Crithian space. Minho's face appeared on screens throughout the Empire. She spoke calmly, reading from a prepared statement. "Attention, Crithian Empire. This is Admiral Minho of the Terran Annihilation Fleet. 300 years ago, you destroyed our homeworld. You killed 6 billion humans. You believed you had eliminated us. You were wrong. We have returned, and we have not come for negotiation. We have not come for territory. We have come to end your species. For every human who died on Earth, 1,000 Crithians will follow. This is not a declaration of war. This is a promise of extinction. We are coming." The transmission ended. Across Crithian space, panic began to spread. They had forgotten about the humans, had assumed they were gone. Now they learned the truth. Humanity had survived. Humanity had grown strong. And humanity wanted blood. "All ships," Minho said quietly. "Jump to the first target. Begin the annihilation." The fleet vanished from space, folding across light years in an instant. When they reappeared at the edge of Crithian territory, every sensor in the Empire screamed warnings. The silent centuries were over. Humanity had returned, and they had brought hell with them. The mining station at the edge of Crithian space stopped transmitting on a Tuesday morning, Galactic Standard Time. The operations manager in the regional office stared at his screen, confused. The station had been there for 60 years, pulling valuable minerals from an asteroid field. It had never missed a check-in before. He sent a message asking for status. No response. He tried again. Still nothing. Finally, he sent a patrol ship to investigate. The ship arrived at the station's coordinates and found nothing. Not debris, not wreckage, just empty space where a mining station used to be. The patrol ship sent back footage. Whatever had destroyed the station had done it so completely that there was not even dust left. The patrol commander was still trying to figure out what could do such a thing when his ship exploded. In the Crithian military headquarters, the report was filed and then forgotten. Patrol ships disappeared sometimes. It happened. Pirates, equipment failure, navigation errors. Nothing to worry about. But then another station went silent. And another. 3 in 1 month, all along the outer border of Crithian space. Intelligence Officer Taeyong pulled the reports and spread them across his desk. He was a human, one of the few who had been captured years ago and forced to work for the Empire. The Crithians found humans useful for analyzing data, even if they considered them inferior. Taeyong looked at the pattern of disappearances and felt something cold settle in his stomach. He had been a child when Earth burned. His parents had died in the bombardment. The Crithians had taken him because he was smart and because they needed workers. He had learned to keep his head down and do his job and not cause trouble. But now, looking at these reports, he felt hope for the first time in decades. "Sir," he said to his Crithian supervisor, "these disappearances follow a pattern. They are not random. Someone is targeting our outer stations." The supervisor barely looked up from his own work. "Pirates. File it with border security." "I do not think it is pirates, sir. The destruction is too complete, too precise. Then what is it?" Taeyong hesitated. "I need to investigate further before I can say." "Fine, waste your time if you want. Let me know if you find anything actually important." Taeyong went back to his office and pulled up every sensor log from the border regions. Most showed nothing unusual. But one science vessel had captured something on long-range sensors before it vanished. The footage was grainy and distorted, but it showed a ship. A massive ship, bigger than any Crithian battleship, and on its hull, barely visible, was a symbol. A blue and white sphere. Taeyong sat back in his chair, his hands shaking. They had survived. Somehow, impossibly, humanity had survived, and if that ship was any indication, they had done more than survive. They had been building. He copied the footage and sent it through secure channels to the few other humans working in the Crithian government. Within hours, word spread through the hidden human network. The humans who served as slaves, as workers, as servants throughout the Empire, they all learned the same thing. Their people were coming. Taeyong tried to present his findings to the War Council. He stood in the same chamber where Ambassador Daeho had pleaded for peace 3 centuries earlier. The Crithians looked down at him with the same contempt. "You are telling us," Supreme Commander Valtris said slowly, "that humans have returned?" "Yes, sir." "The evidence suggests the humans are extinct," Valtris interrupted. "We exterminated them 300 years ago. What you are seeing is probably debris or sensor errors. Sir, the ship in the footage is clearly—" "Enough!" Valtris leaned back in his seat. "You humans always were prone to seeing patterns where none exist. File your report and get back to work. We have real threats to deal with." Taeyong left the chamber knowing that the Crithians would not listen. They could not believe that a species they had destroyed could come back. Their arrogance was too great. Good, he thought. Let them be surprised. 3 days later, the message arrived. It broadcast on every frequency, impossible to block or ignore. Admiral Minho's face appeared on screens across the Empire, and she spoke in a voice that was calm and cold and absolutely certain. Taeyong watched from his office as she delivered humanity's promise. Extinction, total annihilation, revenge for Earth. When the message ended, he closed his eyes and allowed himself to smile for the first time in years. The War Council finally believed the threat was real when scout ships reported the size of the human fleet. 2,800 warships, each one more advanced than anything the Crithians had. Valtris stared at the numbers and felt something he had not felt in centuries. Fear. How? He demanded. How did they build so many ships? How did we not detect them? None of his advisors had answers. The humans had vanished completely after Earth's destruction. 300 years of silence, and now they appeared with a fleet that rivaled the Empire's entire military. Mobilize everything, Valtris ordered. Call back every fleet from every sector. I want 10,000 ships at the border within a week. We crush them now before they can advance further. The Empire's vast military machine ground into motion. Ships from across Crithian space began jumping toward the border. It was the largest mobilization in Imperial history. Valtris was confident it would be enough. He had been confident before when Earth stood against him. He had learned nothing from that mistake. The first battle happened at Krithia Prime, the Empire's primary military fortress. The planet held the Empire's largest shipyards, training facilities, and command centers. It was protected by the most powerful defensive grid ever built and surrounded by 1,600 warships. Admiral Minho studied the defenses from her command ship. Her tactical officer, Captain Heejin, stood beside her looking at the same displays. They are arranged in a standard defensive formation, Heejin noted, expecting us to approach from long range, engage in an artillery duel while we try to break through their lines. Then we will not do that, Minho said. All ships prepare for close-range fold. Coordinates uploaded. Execute on my mark. The human fleet vanished. They did not approach from outside the defense perimeter. They did not try to fight through the Crithian formations. They simply folded space and appeared in the middle of the enemy fleet, at point-blank range. The Crithian commanders had half a second to realize what happened before the human ships opened fire. At such close range, Crithian shields were useless. Human weapons tore through hulls like paper. Ships exploded. Stations vaporized. The defensive grid collapsed. The battle lasted 43 minutes. 1,600 Crithian ships were destroyed. Humanity lost 12. Target the shipyards, Minho ordered. Nothing survives. The human fleet systematically destroyed every construction facility on Krithia Prime. They did not try to capture them. They did not care about preserving the technology. They simply obliterated everything until there was nothing left but wreckage and fire. Then they folded away to the next target. News of the defeat spread through the Empire like wildfire. Valtris could not believe the reports. 1,600 ships gone in less than an hour? It was impossible. His fleet was supposed to be invincible. How are they doing this? He demanded. Their ships can fold space, one of his analysts explained, her voice shaking. They can appear anywhere instantly. Our weapons cannot track them. Our formations cannot contain them. Then adapt. Figure out how to fight them. But the Crithians could not adapt fast enough. Their military doctrine had not changed in centuries. They relied on overwhelming firepower and numerical superiority. But those advantages meant nothing when the enemy could teleport behind your lines and destroy you before you could react. Captain Bora led the assault on Helix Nebula, a major Crithian trading hub. Her ship, the Silent Fury, demonstrated the new human tactics perfectly. She would fold in, unleash a broadside that destroyed several enemy ships, then fold out before return fire could hit her, appear somewhere else, fire again, vanish again. The Crithians could not keep up. Their targeting computers could not lock onto ships that kept disappearing. Their formations fell apart as human ships appeared in their midst, spreading chaos and death. The Battle of Helix Nebula ended with complete human victory. Not a single Crithian ship escaped, but it was what happened after the battle that truly terrified the Empire. A Crithian colony nearby sent a surrender message, offering to submit to human authority if their lives were spared. Admiral Soman received the message and considered it for exactly 3 seconds. "Rejected," she said. "Glass the colony." "Sir," her communications officer said carefully. "They are surrendering. Surely we can—" "I said glass it. Those are my orders." The colony died. 2 billion Crithians burned. Their surrender meant nothing. Their pleas for mercy were ignored. Humanity had not come to conquer. They had come to exterminate. The galaxy watched in horror as humanity's campaign continued. Species that had been enslaved by the Crithians saw their masters dying, and did not know whether to cheer or be terrified. If humans could do this to the Crithians, what would stop them from turning on everyone else? Supreme Commander Valtris made a desperate decision. He would take the entire remaining Imperial fleet, over 6,000 ships, and strike at the humans where it would hurt them most. He pulled up the coordinates for Earth in the Imperial archives. If the humans wanted revenge for their world, he would make them watch. 10 years after the destruction of the Crithian homeworld, Captain Hyegen sat in her quarters aboard the dreadnought Eternal Vigil and tried to remember what it felt like to be human. Not the vengeful weapon she had become, but the person she used to be. The girl who had loved music and art and watching stars. She could not remember. The last Crithians were scattered across the galaxy now, hiding in the forgotten corners of space. Maybe 100 million remained out of the trillions that had once ruled the Empire. Humanity hunted them systematically, tracking down every colony, every hideout, every single survivor. Commander Jahe had developed it into a science. His intelligence division analyzed refugee patterns, predicted where the survivors would flee, and dispatched hunter groups to intercept them. It was efficient. It was thorough. It was monstrous. "We found another one," his aide reported. "A small colony on a frozen moon in the outer rim. Estimated population 50,000. Mostly elderly and children." Jahe nodded and dispatched a ship to eliminate them. He did not think about the families that would die. He had stopped thinking about individuals years ago. Now there were only numbers. Targets to be eliminated. Debts to be paid. Dr. Nari had left the fleet 3 years earlier. She could not watch anymore, could not be part of what humanity had become. She now lived on one of the human colonies, trying to rebuild some sense of normal life. But the nightmares followed her. She dreamed of the Draxis system dying. She dreamed of the transports full of civilians being destroyed. She dreamed of Earth burning, and then she dreamed of humanity setting the galaxy on fire in response. In her dreams, she could not tell the difference between the monsters anymore. Admiral Somin continued to lead the extermination campaign with cold efficiency. She was 70 years old now. Her body kept functional through medical treatments, but her spirit had died somewhere along the way. She existed only to complete the mission. Nothing else mattered. She stood on the bridge of her flagship and reviewed casualty reports. 600 billion Crithians dead, maybe more. The exact number was hard to calculate because they had destroyed so many records, vaporized so many worlds. "Is it enough?" Captain Bora asked quietly, standing beside her. Somin looked at the numbers and thought about Earth. 6 billion humans had died. They had killed 600 billion Crithians in return. 100 Crithian lives for every human life lost. "No," Somin said. "It will never be enough." But the galaxy was changing around them. The species that the Crithians had enslaved were rebuilding their civilizations. They looked at humanity with fear and gratitude mixed together. grateful that the Empire had fallen, terrified of what humanity had become to make it fall. A coalition of species sent a delegation to meet with human leadership. They came to one of the colony worlds where the human government maintained offices. President Jian's granddaughter, also named Jian, received them. "We come to ask humanity to stop," the lead delegate said. She was from a species called the Ventari, insect-like beings who had been enslaved for centuries. "The Crithian Empire is destroyed. Their military is gone. The survivors pose no threat to anyone. Please end this hunt." Jian looked at the delegation with tired eyes. She had not wanted this position. She had not wanted to be responsible for decisions that would define humanity's place in the galaxy. But someone had to do it. "The Crithians murdered our homeworld," she said quietly. "They killed 6 billion of us. Do you know what it is like to have your entire species nearly exterminated?" "Oh, we do," the Ventari delegate replied. "The Crithians did the same to us. They killed half our population when we tried to resist. We understand your pain. But if you kill all of them, you become what they were. You become the evil empire." "Perhaps we are already that," Jian acknowledged. "But our dead demand justice." "Your dead are beyond caring," the delegate said gently. "They cannot know if you avenge them or not. But the living must continue, and the living must decide what kind of galaxy we want to build." The meeting ended without resolution. The delegation left, and Jian sat alone in her office, thinking about the choice before humanity. Continue the hunt until every Crithian was dead, or stop now and try to build something new. She did not know which choice was right. On the military ships, the debate was simpler. Admiral Minho stood before her senior officers and asked for their opinion. "Intelligence suggests approximately 100 million Crithians remain," she said. "They are scattered, disorganized, no longer a threat. Do we continue the hunt or do we stop here?" The room was silent for a long moment. Finally, Captain Hiejin spoke. "I have killed so many of them that I have lost count," she said quietly. "I have destroyed worlds. I have watched billions die, and I feel nothing anymore. If we continue this, if we hunt down every last one, we stop being human. We become machines designed only for killing." "They made us into this," Commander Youngsu said. "They created this weapon when they burned Earth." "I know," Hiejin replied. "But we choose whether to remain weapons forever, or whether to put down the sword and try to be people again." Admiral Minho listened to the arguments, but in her heart, she already knew her answer. She had been born for one purpose, to avenge her father and her homeworld. That purpose had defined every moment of her life. If she stopped now, what would she be? "We continue," she decided, "until none remain." But not all the fleet agreed. Ships began to leave, their crews deciding they had done enough. Captain Bora was among them. She transmitted her resignation to Minho and took her ship back to the colonies. She wanted to see if she could still remember how to live without killing. The remaining fleet pressed on, hunting the scattered Crithians. They found colonies on ice worlds, hideouts in asteroid belts, refugee ships drifting through empty space. All were destroyed. Engineer Juon participated in the hunt, but it felt hollow now. He thought about Lieutenant Doyen, shot dead for hesitating. He thought about the millions he had killed with the Starbreaker. At night he wrote letters he would never send, apologizing to people who could no longer hear him. 5 years later, Intelligence Officer Taeyong reported to Admiral Minho that they had found the last major concentration of Crithians, a hidden colony deep in uncharted space, home to maybe 20 million survivors. They had been there for decades, building a quiet life far from the war. "Are there any military installations?" Minho asked. "No, sir. It appears to be entirely civilian. Families, schools, farms. They are not a threat," Minho nodded. "Prepare the fleet for assault." Taeyong hesitated. He had spent years helping humanity hunt down his former masters. But now, looking at the data on this colony, he felt doubt for the first time. "Sir, they are not soldiers. They are just people trying to survive." "So were we," Minho replied. "Prepare the fleet." The human ships folded into the system and surrounded the colony. The Crithians knew what was coming. They did not try to fight. They simply gathered their families and waited. Admiral Minho stood on her bridge, her finger over the firing command. One press and the last major group of Crithians would die. Earth would be avenged. The debt would be paid. She thought about her father who had died defending Earth. She thought about the billions who had burned. She thought about the 300 years humanity had spent preparing for this revenge. and she thought about what Dr. Nari had said years ago. We are becoming monsters. Minho's hand hovered over the command. The bridge crew watched her, waiting. Outside, 20 million Krithians waited to die. She lowered her hand. Stand down, she said quietly. We are done. The bridge crew stared at her in shock. Sir? Captain Heejin asked. I said stand down. We have killed enough. Earth is avenged. Our people have justice. If we continue, we are no longer defending humanity. We are just killers. But the doctrine, someone began. The doctrine was written by people mad with grief, Minho interrupted. I was one of them. But grief cannot be the only thing that defines us. If we kill these last Krithians, we prove that we learned nothing, that we are no better than the empire we destroyed. She looked around at her crew. Humanity survived. Against all odds, we survived. And we made the empire pay for what they did. But if we want to be more than weapons, if we want to actually live again, we have to stop. We have to choose to be people instead of monsters. The order went out to the fleet. Stand down. End the hunt. The war was over. Not everyone agreed with the decision. Admiral Soman refused the order and took her remaining ships to attack the colony anyway. But the rest of the fleet stopped her, disabling her ships without destroying them. Soman was relieved of command and taken into custody. The Krithian colony survived. It would be the only major group to do so. Across the galaxy, scattered refugees heard the news that humanity had stopped hunting them, and they wept with relief. 10 years after Minho's decision, Captain Heejin returned to Earth's system. The planet still hung in space, dead and scarred. The memorial station still kept their vigil. She stood on the observation deck of her ship and looked down at the world humanity had lost. We avenged you, she said quietly to the ghosts. We made them pay. I hope it was enough. I hope you can rest now. Earth did not answer. It never would. But Heejin felt something shift in her chest. Not peace, exactly, but perhaps the beginning of acceptance. Supreme Commander Valtris stood on the bridge of his flagship as the world collapsed around him. Through the viewing screen, he could see Earth hanging in space, dead and brown and silent. Around him, his fleet was being systematically destroyed. Human ships folded in and out of existence, appearing just long enough to unleash devastating fire before vanishing again. Krithian vessels exploded one after another, their shields useless against weapons they had never imagined. Valtris had lived for 400 years. He had commanded armies that conquered worlds. He had never felt helpless before. Now he understood how the humans must have felt 3 centuries ago. All ships focus fire on Sector 7, he commanded. Concentrate our attack. We can break through if we... A human dreadnought folded in directly above his flagship. At this range, Valtris could see the name painted on its hull, Remembrance. Below the name was a list of cities, Seoul, New York, Mumbai, Lagos, the cities Earth had lost. The dreadnought fired. Valtris's flagship shattered like glass. He had time for one final thought before the explosion consumed him. We should have left them alone. Admiral Minho watched from the bridge of the Vengeance as the last Krithian ship in the fleet exploded. 6,000 warships destroyed. The entire military leadership of the Empire eliminated, and it had taken less than 4 hours. Status report, she said calmly. All human vessels accounted for, Captain Heejin reported. We lost 38 ships. Estimated Krithian casualties, 3 million. 3 million Krithians dead in one battle. It was barely a fraction of what humanity had lost. They had so much further to go. Set course for Krithian space, Minho ordered. We continue the campaign. The human fleet divided into smaller battle groups and spread across the Empire. They hit military targets, government centers, shipyards, anything that could threaten them or help the Krithians rebuild. The Empire tried to defend itself, but it was useless. Every battle ended the same way. Krithian forces destroyed, human forces barely scratched. Commander Jae-hee led one of the battle groups toward a major industrial world. Intelligence suggested it produced weapons and ship components for the Imperial military. As his fleet approached, the planet's government sent a message. We are a civilian world, the message said. Our people are not soldiers. Please, we surrender. Do not harm us. Jae-hee read the message and felt nothing. He had been born on one of the colony ships 50 years after Earth's destruction. He had never seen the homeworld except in recordings, but he had grown up with the stories. had grown up learning about the 6 billion who died. Transmit our response, he said. The message went out to the planet below. Did Earth's children receive mercy? Did our unarmed evacuation ships receive mercy? You will receive the same. The bombardment began. The industrial centers were destroyed first, their factories melting under the heat of plasma weapons. Then the cities. The planet had a population of 14 billion. None of them survived. On another front, Captain Bora encountered a Crithian convoy trying to evacuate civilians from a dying colony. Hundreds of transport ships, filled with families fleeing the human advance. They broadcast messages pleading for safe passage. They carried no weapons. They posed no threat. Bora consulted the military doctrine that Admiral Soman had written. The words were simple: total war. No mercy, no surrender, no survivors. She gave the order. The transports were destroyed. Millions died in the cold of space. Not all humans agreed with these tactics. On the Vengeance, Dr. Nari confronted Admiral Minho privately after learning about the civilian casualties. We are becoming monsters, Nari said, her voice shaking with anger. These are not soldiers we are killing. They are children, families, innocent people who had nothing to do with Earth. Minho looked at her with eyes that showed no emotion. Were Earth's children guilty? Were the families in Sol guilty? Were the babies in the evacuation ships guilty when the Crithians shot them down? That does not make this right, Nari insisted. If we exterminate the Crithians, we become exactly what they were. We become the evil empire. Perhaps, Minho acknowledged, but Earth will be avenged. She pulled up a recording on her terminal. The footage showed Earth burning, showed the cities dying, showed the moment when 6 billion voices went silent. Minho had watched it thousands of times. She would watch it thousands more. Every night I close my eyes and see this, Minho said quietly. I see my homeworld dying. I see my ancestors burning. And I know that the Crithians who did this lived full lives afterward. They celebrated their victory. They never paid for what they did. That ends now. They will pay. Every single one of them. Nari left the meeting knowing she had failed. The human fleet would continue its path of destruction, and nothing would stop it. The Empire was collapsing. Worlds surrendered or tried to flee, but it made no difference. The human fleet pursued every Crithian force they found. Commander Youngsu led an assault on a fortress system that held 10 billion Crithians. The battle was fierce, the defenders desperate. When it ended, the system was empty. Engineer Juan received the order he had been dreading. Admiral Soman wanted to use the Starbreaker. She had selected a target, Draxus, a system with 7 inhabited planets and a total population of 200 billion Crithians. This is genocide, Juan said when he received the order. This is beyond war. We are talking about destroying an entire solar system. I am aware of what we are doing, Soman replied coldly. Deploy the weapon. Juan wanted to refuse. He wanted to throw the weapon into space and let it drift forever. But he thought about Earth. He thought about his grandmother who had died in the bombardment. He thought about everything humanity had lost. He deployed the weapon. The Starbreaker was a small device, barely larger than a fighter craft. It folded directly into the heart of the Draxus star and activated. The star's fusion reaction began to destabilize. The process would take 6 hours to complete. Juan watched from his ship as the system died. The star grew brighter and brighter, its surface churning with violent reactions. Planets closer to the star began to heat up, their atmospheres burning away. On the worlds, people looked up at their sun and knew they were about to die. When the star finally went supernova, it happened almost peacefully. A brilliant flash of light, and then the entire system ceased to exist. 7 planets, 200 billion lives gone. The galaxy reacted with horror. Species that had remained neutral suddenly turned against humanity. They called the humans monsters. They compared them to the Crithians, said they were worse than the Empire had ever been. Humanity did not care. They had one goal, and they would not stop until it was complete. Across Crithian space, the species that had been enslaved by the Empire began to rebel. They saw their masters dying and seized the opportunity for freedom. Humanity did nothing to help or hinder them. They simply continued their systematic destruction of every Crithian military and government installation. In the shadows, Intelligence Officer Tai Young worked with other humans who had been enslaved by the Empire. They provided targeting information, helped identify where Crithian leaders were hiding, and sabotaged defense systems from within. Taeyong felt no guilt about his betrayal. He had spent decades serving the species that killed his parents. Now he would help erase them from existence. The Krithian Empire, which had stood for 12,000 years, fell apart in less than 2 years. Their military was shattered. Their government was destroyed. Their economy collapsed. Billions of Krithians tried to flee into deep space, hoping to escape the human advance. Humanity hunted them all. Battle groups pursued every fleeing ship. They tracked every hidden colony. They found Krithians hiding on remote moons, in asteroid belts, on ice worlds at the edge of star systems. None were spared. The human fleet regrouped at the Krithian homeworld, the birthplace of the Empire. It was a beautiful planet, with purple oceans and red forests. 300 billion Krithians lived there, the largest concentration of the species that remained. Admiral Minho stood before her fleet and gave one final offer. The same offer the Krithians had given Earth: surrender completely, dismantle your military, submit to our authority, or die. The Krithian planetary government debated for 3 days. Some wanted to surrender, to save whatever lives they could. Others refused to kneel to the humans, the species they had believed inferior. In the end, pride won. The Krithians rejected the surrender terms. Admiral Soman did not hesitate. She turned to Lieutenant Doyen, the officer who controlled the Starbreaker. "Activate the weapon," she ordered. Doyen's hands moved toward the controls, then stopped. He looked up at Soman, his face pale. "Sir, there are 300 billion people down there, children. We would be killing. Activate the weapon," Soman repeated. "Sir, please. This is too far. We have already won. The Empire is destroyed. We do not need to—" Soman pulled out her sidearm and shot Doyen. He collapsed to the floor, blood pooling beneath him. She stepped over his body and activated the Starbreaker herself. The weapon folded into the Krithian sun. 6 hours later, the homeworld of the Empire that had conquered half the galaxy ceased to exist. 300 billion lives ended in fire. Admiral Minho watched it happen and felt nothing. No satisfaction, no horror. Just emptiness. "Are we done?" Captain Hyejin asked quietly. "No," Minho said. "Not until every Krithian is dead."